Welcome everyone to today's colloquium lecture, the lecture series for the Department of City and Regional Planning. My name is Linda Shai and I'm delighted to be your host for this event today. A special welcome to all of our guests in person or online coming for our open house today. I'm delighted to introduce in a little bit our guest speakers today, President Joe Muturi from Slum Dwellers International and Ms. Charity Mumbi, also from Slum Dwellers International, Kenya. Before I introduce them, could I ask Professor Stefan Schmidt to come give the land acknowledgement today?
Thank you. Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayakona. The Gayakona are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy preceded the establishment Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of the Gayakono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayakono people, past, present, to these lands and waters.
Thank you, Stefan. This lecture is also supported by the Russell Van Ness Black Lecture Fund, and I'm especially grateful to Chris Hinman, Andre Hafner, and Alexis Marquez for helping us organize these events. As we are nearing the halfway point or at the halfway point of the lecture series, I know that those of you who are taking this lecture series for credit are having some questions about what the final paper reflection essay is. So if you have not taken the lecture series before for credit, this may be new to you. Welcome. It is not at all scary. This is a 1-credit lecture series. So the final reflection essay will be a 3-page double-spaced document, 12-size font, a fairly short reflection. And what I would like to see you in that essay write about is what you have observed, what you're taking away, what themes you see, what things surprised you. I would prefer that, in fact, please do not regurgitate the information. I have been here for all of these sessions. I know what the speakers have said. And if you speak intelligently about them, we also know that you were here. So I'm not looking for proof of the fact that you were here. I'm looking for the fact that you are thinking about these events and linking them together. I would say that this essay is not really for me, although I really enjoy reading them. This essay is really for you. In the process of writing this is how you make sense of 6 very different presentations and connect them in your mind as to what they speak to in relationship to each other. If you have any other questions about this, don't hesitate to contact me at the email listed on the course Canvas page. All right, so today I am really delighted to host our guests from Slum Dwellers International. For those of you who may or may not know, I will give a little bit of an introduction to this topic, especially since we have students here from Open House. For many cities, for all of the human history of like rapid urbanization, the challenges of providing adequate infrastructure and housing have always been immense. And we know this certainly from the United States and many cities of what is now considered the global north. They have been able to meet many of those needs, so certainly not all. And what we see in the global south is large expanses of informal settlements in parts of South Asia and many African cities. These figures can be astonishingly high. Something like 75% of all people in major cities in Africa, for instance, are living in slum settlements. And this is, I think, reflective of a number of different issues. One is that the population demographic trends are pushing for very large populations. And so the urbanization trends are very fast with lots of people. And the places that are undertaking this urbanization, grappling with it, are dealing with very few resources, whereas more colonial governments had the benefits of lots of resources. These cities that are growing do not necessarily have such riches. They some of them, for some of their history, have not been democratic. And so not only is there a lack of capacity sometimes or a lack of funding, but there is actively in some ways a lack of recognition of the right to housing and oppressive forces for evicting people rather than supporting those who are there. And so some of the most inspiring stories that we have seen in redressing some of these conditions have come not necessarily from state governments, but actually from communities themselves who have organized in each country to develop their own strategies and to instigate change, not only through community-based efforts, but often through multi-scalar networks that connect their city and national governments, as well as forming important international networks. So SDI, Slum Dwellers International, had strong roots in South Asia and India. It has grown to become the premier international network for dealing with slum dwellers of rights and access to housing. And that provides a whole another range of power of ideas, of technologies, of staff capacity, and of a platform for articulating change to international institutions. So it's a real delight to have them today. And I should note that we don't only just host these speakers who are coming today as our colloquium lecture series, but that the Center for Cities that is about to be launched here at Cornell is establishing a stronger long-term partnership with Slum Dwellers International in order to support their work and initiatives that have already begun in places like Nairobi. And so the work that you're going to see here, if it's interesting to you, if you're excited about it, and you're currently a student here, we are actually going to be funding I think 2 internships this summer for you to go to Kenya and work with Joe and Charity in the places that they are talking about, especially as related to climate change adaptation. So if you are interested in those opportunities, you can apply through Handshake. And if you have any questions, I'm told you should contact Ashley Devonish Robinson, and her email is adr92@cornell.edu. All right, without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. Joe Muturi, the president of the Slum Dwellers International Network, is a social activist and leader of Muungano wa Wanavijiji. I think you will have to say that for me. The National Federation of Slum Dwellers in Kenya. Muungano is the largest social movement in Kenya, which for over 20 years has campaigned against forced evictions and in support of secure tenure and improved services for Kenya's poor communities. Joe has been extensively involved in government and city-led projects that affect urban poor communities in Kenya, working with donor agencies and academia to build strong relationships between such programs and the residents for which they are intended. One of these is the precedent-setting Mukuru Special Planning Area, SPA, project in Nairobi's Mukuru slums. Mukuru SPA sets in motion one of the largest informal settlement upgrading projects ever, aiming to transform a slum area of 650 acres into a healthy, functioning neighborhood, improving the lives of people who live there. Joe has for many years worked to assist communities to build consensus on strategy, budgeting, planning, and actual implementation of projects such as Mukuru SPA. He has been instrumental in building federations in East and West Africa and has established partnerships with government and key stakeholders for Muungano and for the SDI network. He is also a climate change activist and resilience champion, championing awareness of the effects of climate change on urban slum neighborhoods. Joe is joined today by Ms. Charity Mumbi, who has a professional background in urban and regional planning. She is currently also pursuing a Master's of Science degree in Sustainable Urban Development. She has always been driven by the desire to plan with the community, not for the community. And so she joined SDI Kenya in 2018 as a projects officer. Her core activities include community planning, data collection and analysis, community mapping, research roles, and providing technical ArcGIS skills, producing community-led plans and designs, and stakeholder engagements and coordinating projects from inception to implementation. Please join me in welcoming our guests today.
Thank you very much, Linda. I hope everyone can hear me. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Linda, for that wonderful introduction. Just to add a little bit to introduce Charity, who this is her first time to do this lecture. So Charity came to work for the Slum Dwellers Movement. First of all, to correct, the actual name for the Slum Dwellers Movement is Muungano wa Wanavijiji, basically means Federation of Slum Dwellers. So Charity came to work with us as an intern from University of Nairobi. And she decided to stay. One thing we do in the SDI networks, all federations, we work across 37 countries. When we get students like Charity, first thing we do is we have a process called deschooling. We do school them. Basically, is to tell that everything you have learned in university, keep it aside, and now let the community teach you, work with you, teach you how to plan, because we realize that most of the things that they are taught in university and in school and the standards do not necessarily apply in informal settlements. So Charity, after her internship, she decided to stay. She decided to work and plan for slum dwellers. However, how unglamorous that job is. And I think the Federation we have seen the support. And the main reason I requested Charity to be part of this lecture, Charity was instrumental from day one in the Mukuru planning area process. And she has a lot of first-hand information on the process, on the engagement, the upward engagement, and community engagement. And just briefly, the way SDI network works, we have the Federation of Slum Dwellers. Basically, these are groups, CPOs, self-help groups, women cooperatives that are informal settlements. They form the federation.
Hey, I'm sorry Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your connection is breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if your mic is not quite where your mouth is anymore, or if you need to move a little. Right, or maybe you could try turning your video off to improve the connection. Andre, I think we still want his slides if possible, but just to have his video off. Joe, are you still here? I think he's still there. His square is there. Joe, if you're there, can you say something? All right. Yeah. Oh, and I don't hear you now. I can see you moving. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. Joe, can you try saying something? Oh no, we can't hear you at all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, probably. I think it was the. So you can let me unmute let me stop my video. Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I don't know where I dropped off. Linda, probably you can. Where did I drop off?
I think you
So
were.
basically, I was explaining how the SDI network works, where we have federations of groups in informal settlements, basically who are addressing issues around secure tenure, adequate housing, and basically access to services, access to credit. One of the challenges of Africa, most of the people who live in informal settlements, slums, are people who are basically invisible. They are not anywhere in the national government or city government's radar in terms of planning, in terms of allocation of resources. So basically, and the way we work, we have a federation, and each federation sets up an organ or an NGO, a special purpose organization that helps support the federation in its work. For Kenya, Muungano Wanavijiji is supported by Slum Dwellers International Kenya, where Charity works. And basically, they work on a day-to-day basis with communities. This is an agency that has planners, architects, it has finance people, and their role is to work with communities in housing, in land issues, in advocacy issues, and the challenges they are facing. And I don't know if we move to the next slide, the first slide, just to give you a brief.
I'm sorry, Joe. I think we had a misunderstanding. Do you want us to share your slides, or will you be sharing them from your end?
Charity, do you have the slides? I thought probably you'll share them from your end, but Charity can share them. Nice to see you, Victoria. Okay, thank you. Basically, we'll start and give you just a background of Nairobi. Charity, next slide. I'll just do the introductions and talk about a little bit about Mukuru. And Charity now will talk about the technical. We'll talk about the technical details that went into that planning. So Nairobi is Kenya's largest capital. The land size, as you can see, is almost 700 kilometers squared. At the moment, we have a population of 5 million by day and 4 million by night. So the growth, the urbanization rate is 4%, growth rate is 4.1%, and the GDP is 60%. Nairobi produces a GDP of 60% of the national GDP. Next slide, please. And if you bear with me, I'll try to be a little bit faster so that we can leave a lot of more questions, more time for questions. Charity, next slide. So this is the situation in Nairobi. If you look at that population of over 5 million, you realize that 3%, almost 60%, more than 60% of the people who reside in Nairobi live in informal settlements. Charity, go back a little bit. And most of the people who live in these informal settlements, most of them don't have secure tenure. They live in land that most of the time is not conducive for habitation. Most of them reclaim swamps. Most of them live along the river riparians. Others live under high power voltage lines. You'll see that so some of the challenges that they face, most of them are squatters on land. They invade these lands and settle. And part of the challenge that brought this and the mushrooming of slums was that in the inception of independence, most of the services, jobs were centralized in Nairobi, universities, schools. So people moved from the rural areas to come and look for jobs in the city. Most of the factories were basically situated in the city of Nairobi. So we had a lot of migration, people coming from rural areas to come in Nairobi. And the city was not prepared to receive the influx of people who are coming from the rural areas. So what happened is that the services were stretched. The city was not prepared in terms of housing, in terms of services like water, sewer, infrastructure. So as years went by, the resources become very thinly distributed. So that's why very ingenious people came up and started building these shacks, and some of them, some squatters invaded land, and over time the slums have grown. At the moment, if you look at the city of Nairobi alone, we have 153 informal settlements. One of the things about SDI, we say one of the processes and our strong pillars is equipping communities with data collection, profiles of their areas. We do a house-to-house survey of the areas that we are living in. And with this information, we leverage and we are able to now to start negotiations with the city and the national authorities in the issues that we are advocating on. So initially, if you talk to Nairobi City at the council level or the county level, from there, they used to say they have only 4 big slums. But from the information we provided, we actually identified 153 slums in the city of Nairobi. So as you can see from the slide, the challenges: insecure tenure, poor and inhabitable housing, lack of access to health facilities, lack of access to clean drinking water, lack of access to toilet facilities, basically all the characteristics of a slum. Next slide, Charity. So if you look at, these are the things, these are some of the challenges I talked about: majority, poor housing, broken socioeconomic ties, reduced dignity among residents. In some communities, they use flying toilets. In some communities, they go just in terms of because of the lack of toilets, they can relieve themselves anywhere. And these are some of the challenges that come. They also face the issues of evictions, because like I said, number one, when the governments want to do a development project, the easiest target are usually the informal settlements. If well-connected individuals within government and they have resources and they have money and they want land to develop housing, the easiest target is usually the informal settlements. So we end up with evictions, forced demolitions, and we end up with thousands and thousands of people losing their homes and becoming homeless. The outcome of this is increased marginalization among the urban poor, mushrooming on informal settlements elsewhere, ineffective policies tailored to address the urban informality. So we don't have policies, and the ones we have are very weak. There's some years back we developed an eviction policy, but it's somewhere it was not passed as law by the parliamentarians. So it's still lying in the shelf somewhere. Next slide, Charity, please. So this is just a brief of where Mukuru is. Move back a little bit, Charity, back. On the Mukuru, where Mukuru is situated. So these are we call it the Mukuru Belt and the Mukuru SPA area. If you look at the maps below, it shows where Mukuru is. We call it the Mukuru Belt. Basically, around Mukuru is where the industrial area is, where we have a lot of factories, we have a lot of companies that produce goods for local consumption and imports. And what led to the mushrooming, to the growth of Mukuru? These are people who provide labor and labor to these factories around Mukuru. Next slide, please. And I think this, the slides, we will share the slides for anybody who wants, and we'll give more information where you can find more information about Mukuru. So to talk about the Mukuru Special Planning Area, first of all, we worked with a number of, we got funding from IDRC, that is the Canadian research, the Canadian agency. They gave us resources to do a research around Mukuru. But what brought the challenge of us working in Mukuru? We had a lot of communities coming to us because, like I mentioned before, most of them squat on private land. Most of the land was taken away from them while they were living in Mukuru. They had already established communities in Mukuru. Most of the land went to well-connected individuals within government, within the military, and within the judiciary. So what triggered the work in Mukuru? We had a lot of communities facing evictions in 2012. So basically, they were coming to us, telling us, we are being told by this landowner, we either pay him 60 million or we move. So after we collected almost 21 eviction notices, we went to court. We got temporary injunctions. We got something called I think it's a stay order that nothing happens within Mukuru. Nobody gets evicted until the case are heard and determined. But for us who have been in this game for a very long time, we knew that poor people could not get justice in our court of laws. We usually say the way our courts are designed, the way our justice systems is designed, we have one law that works for the poor and one law that works for the rich. And usually the poor don't get any justice in our courts of law. So the other thing, so we went to court, we got orders, but we knew those orders were, for us, we use it as a strategy. The orders basically were to give us enough time to start organizing, to start mobilizing, and to collect more information within Mukuru. So what we did, we looked at our laws after we looked at the challenges that are in Mukuru, the issues of fires, the issues of flooding, the issues of outbreaks of diseases. And within our laws, our county laws, there's a policy that states that the county can declare a community or a slum a special planning area because of the challenges that they are having. So we are able to prove that Mukuru has peculiar challenges of flooding and etc. And we approached the county, and the county declared Mukuru as special planning areas. This is after hard work. But what was clear is that the county is the one which is supposed to plan, but the county didn't have enough capacity in their planning department, so they requested our help to help plan Mukuru. So after we got the special planning area was gazetted, and we started working. So the way we designed the special planning area, we looked at, so these are just of the numbers or the statistics around Mukuru. Charity, if you go to the next slide, the way we organized ourselves within the county departments. So as Charity is looking at that, like I said, these are just a little bit, just go back a little bit, Charity. So this is there. So this is the declaration, the Gazette Notice, the Physical Planning Act. The declaration took effect from 1st August 2017. And we are supposed to have, the county was supposed to do this SPA within 2 years, a time frame of 2 years. This provided an opportunity for an effective, active community participation in the planning process. So I'll talk later about the planning process. So Charity, can you move faster to the slide that the way we were organized around consortia? So this is the way we looked at, and we organized ourselves in these thematic areas. And this, we aligned ourselves in the way the county structure works in terms of departments. We have the housing, infrastructure, and commerce. We had the education, youth affairs, and culture. We had the health. We had land and institutional frameworks. We had water, sanitation, and energy. Then we had the finance department, the environment and natural resources. So our role was coordination of the community and the organization and the communication. So just to mention something in terms of this, we knew that for us, our end game, we wanted to make sure that the people in Mukuru will never live with the threat of evictions. The people of Mukuru will get services. The people of Mukuru will get infrastructure. So for us, that was our end game. So the other thing that was special about Mukuru, we knew that as SDI, our strengths are in community organizing, are in community mobilization, are in data collection, mapping, enumerations, and profiling. So we approach other organizations which had expertise in other areas. So we looked at organizations which were working in Mukuru. For example, in education, we approach a number of institutions like Concern, Oxfam, Health Services. We worked with the Ministry. We worked with the Ministry of Health. We worked with the Kenya Medical Doctors Association, and a number of organizations. For the land and institutional frameworks, we worked with a legal organization called Katiba Institute. For water and sanitation, we worked with Synergy. We worked with Oxfam. For environmental and natural resources, we work with organizations like the Stockholm Environmental Institute. So each consortium were working with a particular department in terms of planning, and each consortia had a team leader. So the other special thing about Mukuru, the county did not provide each resources. So we requested this organization, apart from providing their expertise, their knowledge, they also had to provide resources for the work that they were doing. Next slide, Charity. So for us, our engagement, what was the other special thing and about Mukuru was the community participation. So we looked at the challenges. What are the challenges in Kenya when it comes to community participation? So what the political class do, even the county departments and the government departments, they usually get a group of people, take them to some fancy hotel at the coast. They enjoy the sun and the beach and swim. That's what they call community participation. When they come back, they say there was community participation. But we wanted to make sure that we set the bar in terms of community participation. So the way we organized ourselves from the household level, we looked at the way most of these slums and the structures within the slums are organized. For each, what we call a plot, are 10 structures holding 10 different households. So we organized each of the 10 clusters had a representative. Like I said before, when I go into details of this, it will take too much time. So Charity will share this, or Linda will share this for anybody who is interested. And I said there's more information on our website. So you can go to, but we wanted to make sure that we have almost, if not 100% community participation. So we had household representative working with different in terms of negotiations, in terms of focus group discussions, in terms of what the community aspirations are, how look at the challenges. There are no health centers. How many health centers do they want? There are no schools. How many schools will they want in terms of infrastructure, roads, access to water? Next slide, please, Charity. And can I ask, are we together up to there, or I'm getting lost somewhere? So far, so good.
I think we're good.
We are good. Okay. Yeah. Probably I don't want to spend time speaking to myself. So, like I said, we won't go into the details of this. You'll get this information because this will take most of the time. But this is how the sectors were organized. The community representatives, the participants to discuss sectoral problems and action points. So these are the number of meetings that we did. Housing infrastructure, we did with structure owners. We had 57 meetings. For water and sanitation and energy, we had 13. So all this information is available. Charity, we move to the next slide. So again, these are the consultation areas. Charity, next, please. So this is part of the committee consultation processes. This way, the purposes of the consultations. Number one was to disseminate information. discuss the recommendation at what are the challenges, and then the space negotiations in terms of now, because all this land is occupied. When there's a fire, there's no access to ambulances moving in. If there's somebody who needs to use an ambulance, there's no space. So we had to negotiate with the structure owners to demolish some of the structures to give way to the roads, and Charity will elaborate more on that. Next slide, please, Charity. So this is an aerial view of this is an aerial view of Viwandani. So these are the challenges. If you look at these are how people live in Mukuru. Go back, Charity. Hiyo nini? Just pipes. The next slide, Charity. Just go back to the one I was talking about, the challenges of infrastructure. The previous. So if you look, there's no access. You have that one road, which is very thin. Two cars cannot pass each other. If you look at all this area, somebody probably there's a fire at the far corner, and this is just one of the areas that we are working in. What I was explaining to you before, if you look at those are zinc iron roofs. If you look at what I was talking about, the plot, each structure has 10 units under it. Next slide, Charity. Yeah, so these are the challenges. You look at where sewer end, these are the pipes that people use transport water to distribute water within informal settlements. If you look at the housing, when it floods, the lower bottom left corner, there's nowhere to dispose garbage. So this is just a snapshot of what we are dealing with. Next slide, Charity. Charity, next slide. And you'll have to forgive me, I have to go a little bit faster because we are constrained in time. Here in Nairobi, it's now 7 minutes past 8 o'clock at night. So, like I said, for us, it's community consultations. We had a lot of community consultations. As Charity shared before the slide that we were using in terms of the participation to make sure that we had maximum participation. Technical people like Charity work with communities to produce maps and to collect information. Next, please. So this is the area I wanted Charity. This was more technical. Charity to talk about. I mentioned before we had to negotiate with structure owners to demolish the structures so that we can have roads. And this is an area that Charity probably you can come in and try just to explain the rationale and how the proposal and also talk about the standards, the planning standards in the departments, the standards that are used, and how we negotiated for alternative standards within Mukuru. Go ahead, Charity.
Charity, I think you're muted or your mic is not working.
You can hear me now?
Yes,
yes,
please.
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. I think I'll just go ahead and pause my video for purposes of quality audio. So thank you so much, Joe, for taking us through that very comprehensive discussion of Mukuru. I think I'll just go through the rationale of how we came about these recommendations with the community. So I think I'll pick from where Joe left on some of the strategies that were used. And the first one was dissemination of information. After this information was disseminated to the community, we were able to now establish from the community, which were some of the most felt needs within the community. And one of the most pressing need was the need for infrastructure improvement, more specifically roads and drainage services. And this was because there were a lot of emergency responses that were very difficult for the residents of Mukuru to benefit from because of the poor quality of infrastructure that was existing at the moment. So what happened is that we had what we were calling iterations. So iterations was basically looking at planning from a conventional point of view. And when I say a conventional point of view, is looking at the state recommendations. So when we look at the state recommendations of physical planning in Kenya, they are very rigid for people living in informal settlements, and therefore they are not applicable. For instance, I'll give an example. We have something like roads. So this road we are calling an arterial road. It's a road that's supposed to connect a settlement to the other parts of the city. So that road, the city planning recommends that it should be 48 meters wide. Now, when you come to an informal settlement where we have very high densities, for instance, Mukuru, the density is about 460 persons per acre. So when you look at that density, we cannot afford to have that space in an informal settlement because that would mean extensive displacement of the people living in Mukuru. So that was the first iteration, to look at the conventional standards and just to challenge these standards because they could not work. And so that led us to the second iteration, which was now going to the community and discussing with the community what are some of the functionalities the community felt could be applicable, for instance, in an arterial road. So these conversations were detailed to that level. The community would say that for an arterial road, because it is connecting us from the settlement to the city level, it should be at least wide to accommodate 2 vehicles. The carriageway should be wide to accommodate 2 vehicles. And then they were also recommending that the city arterial road should also have segregated pedestrian paths. It should also have support utilities such as street lights, bus stops, and weather protection sheds. So these are just some of the basic functions that the community recommended. And so the other question that we were asking with the community, or rather the community was asking, what are these functions, what size of road width will they fit within so that the road is sustainable for us, but without displacing a lot of people. So again, the community came up with the recommendation of having the road to 12 meters wide. And so for this 12-meter wide road was to accommodate a carriageway of 6 meters. That's the vehicle space. And then we were also to have an additional 6 meters to accommodate pedestrian and unmotorized transport. And then below this non-motorized space, we also had now the space for drainage system and other utilities. So these are some of the recommendations we had. And then we worked with the community. We had round visits just to check the spaces and also just to check some of the structures that might be affected from these recommendations. Then we also had the other road, which was the sub-arterial road. This sub-arterial road, based on the state, it's supposed to be 30 meters. But now the community again recommended for this road to be 9 meters. They felt that the road could be functional enough as 9 meters because it could accommodate again 2 vehicles and also have some space for drainage system, non-motorized system, and also the support utilities. Then we had, now the sub-arterial road is the road we see in blue in the map. And the first road I mentioned, arterial road, is the road we see in red in the map. Then we also had the collector streets. Those are the roads in green. So the collector streets are supposed to be 15 meters wide based on the planning, Kenya planning. So again, that is very wide for an informal settlement, bearing in mind that a collector street is usually a service road. So for that, the community recommended that it should be 5.5 meters. And the reason why they gave it as 5.5 meters is because we have a lot of emergencies in Mukuru, such as there's need for ambulances to access homesteads very easily, rather the households. There's also a need for fire brigades to access an area that has been affected by fire easily. And so that's why the recommendation was 5.5 meters, so that these roads can be used by these service vehicles easily in order to respond to emergencies. And then finally, we had the fourth road, which we call the local access. So this is a road that simply connects a person to their household level, to the plot level and to the household level. For this level of road, the recommendation from the community was to have 2 meter wide. This was just a road that can fit a handcart easily, so that in case a person is moving from one house or from one structure to another, they can easily use a handcart to move. Yeah, so those are some of the recommendations when it comes to the road infrastructure. I'll just show an aerial image of the road. This is an example of the arterial road, the 12-meter arterial road. So from this image, we can see that we have a carriageway, which is a total of 6 meters. So it means that the 6 meters can support 2 vehicles easily. The reason why we gave 3 meters instead of 3.2 meters as the standard is because we were not promoting high moving vehicles within these roads to secure the safety of pedestrians. Because one interesting factor about Mukuru is that because we don't have a lot of recreational spaces and public spaces, the roads serve as recreational spaces, they serve as public spaces for children, they are the play areas, these are their safe zones, and they also serve a lot as economic hubs for the residents of Mukuru, especially for women who sell on the roadsides. So those are some of the parameters we considered. And then we had the 3-meter footpaths on both sides. And then we had now recommendations of street furniture, such as the street lights and weather protection shades. And then these roads, the footpaths were to accommodate sanitation services beneath. This again is because of space factors. Supposing we had given sanitation services an additional 3 meters, then that would have meant more displacement, and that's why we integrated these spaces. Yeah. So the other recommendation are community facilities. So again, for these ones, we were looking at issues such as hospitals, health facilities. We were looking at education facilities. So for instance, for education facilities, we find that the Kenyan standard states that a school should be 1.2 hectares. A space of 1.2 hectares should be set aside to provide a school. But for Mukuru, we don't have those spaces. Again, here we discussed with the community. The community, through this rationalization, mentioned that they could provide an acre of land to provide these facilities. And here the idea of the community was to have mixed facilities, mixed use facilities. So we don't have standalone facilities. For instance, you'll find a space is a school, but that space will also serve as a recreational center during the weekends. The residents of Mukuru can easily access the playgrounds of the school during the weekends in order to have a sense of recreation within their areas. Yeah. So this map here is just illustrating some of the hospitals that again were proposed by the community. The very sharp blue polygons represent the hospitals that were proposed by the community. Again, this is based on the space available. Again, here, if we look at the recommendations in our country, is that a dispensary, which is the lowest level of a hospital, should be around 2 acres. The community did not have that. And so we worked with less spaces of around half acres in order to provide these facilities. And also there was a recommendation of upgrading the existing facilities in order for them to also serve the residents better. For instance, if a hospital is a dispensary, it could easily be upgraded to a health facility, which we commonly refer to as a health level 3 facility within the country. So we also have the green loop. We see it there. Maybe I'll point with my cursor here. So this is a recommendation of a recreational center. Muturi had mentioned that we have the Ngong River. So this is an ecological zone within Mukuru. So the area has been encroached to provide for settlements or to provide for structures. So the community felt that they needed to have their own space, a space they could own and call theirs. So the recommendation was to have this space expanded to about 15 meters wide on both sides of the river, and then rehabilitate this space to be used as recreational spaces, especially by children and even for small economic activities like putting kiosks. So this again was important because it would help clean the river in that area, prevent a lot of solid waste disposal within the area, improve security even of the river. And this again was important because the community proposed 15 meters, but the Kenya standard states that the river riparian should be 30 meters. So the special planning area was very important because it was trying to challenge the conventional standards that have been put across by the state, because they are not applicable for informal settlements. And the beauty of the plan is that it is the community that planned for themselves and came up with these recommendations because they felt they could fit within the community and they could provide the space for these facilities. So the next slide shows the land use plan for Mukuru. So again, this is something that was developed in collaboration with the community. And so I think, again, here I'll still refer to the state. Or in planning, the state has 9 land uses that it has set aside. However, for Mukuru, as Muturi had mentioned, Mukuru is surrounded by industries. So it usually serves as a dormitory for the people working in the neighboring industries. So the idea here was not to have development control. The state calls land use planning as development control, having development control. But if you control an informal settlement, you are suppressing it even further. So for us, we didn't see it as development control, but we saw it as development promotion. How do we promote development in the community and with the community? So the way that that was working was to have the Arterial Road that I had mentioned, that I had showed previously. The Arterial Road was now to serve as the mixed use 2, which is shown in the map. The mixed use 2 simply meant that along that loop, we would have more of commercial activities and less of residential activities in order to promote transit-oriented development. And then in the rest of the area, which are brown, called mixed use 1, here what we are promoting is more of residential activities and a bit of commercial activities. So we are not discouraging commercial. The idea here is to integrate. How do you integrate both commercial and residential without setting aside spaces and saying, this is commercial alone, this is residential alone? Because these activities have to speak to one another. They have to link. We have to create a live-work environment within the settlement of Mukuru. And then definitely now we had other land uses such as education, which are shown in orange. We had the public purpose, and we also had the recreation. So for public purpose, there are services such as social halls. We have churches which fall within these land use called public purpose. We have issues such as libraries. So all these fall under the public purpose, and also the fire engine spaces that were set aside by the community. So that is how the land use was shaped by the community of Mukuru. So the special planning area has borne a lot of good fruits, because now we have moved from simply saying this is what the community recommended to actualizing the plan. And so these images are showing the plan being actualized by the government and by the community. So for instance, this is a road. Groundbreaking took place and the road began to be constructed in a section of Mukuru called Kwa Reuben. And then we have this second image here, which is showing a drainage being installed again in a section of Kwa Reuben along a road, so that now on top of the drainage, now the area will serve as an NMT or a footpath to support the non-motorized transport. Then we also had stormwater drainages being put in place, as again illustrated in the image. Then we have sewer installation in Kosovo village, the image to your left. So for the sewer installation, again, this was very important for Mukuru, because sewer, the conventional standards is that sometimes sewer installation usually displaces a lot of people, but for Mukuru, what was implemented is called a simplified sewer system. So this means the diameter of the pipe is way narrow than the conventional diameters that are usually put up by the state, meaning very few people will be displaced by installation of sewer system. And so far, 100 toilets have been constructed. from this project. The first pilot, 100 toilets have been constructed, and so far around 850 households are benefiting from that first pilot. Yeah, so then we have the second image, which is again showing a road construction. Then I think this is now a complete road, a level 3 road, the one we called a connector. Then we have an image of a level 3 health facility, which again was constructed by the state and completed. And a level 3 facility can provide a lot of services, including inpatient services of not so complex challenges, and also can offer maternity services. So this is very important for the residents of Mukuru, as initially they did not have some of these services. We also have elevated service reservoirs that have been put up by the state, which is Nairobi Metropolitan Services. These were especially put up during the COVID period, and they were very instrumental because they improved the hygiene of the area, COVID-related hygiene. And they have also helped to reduce poverty penalty, because now the residents of Mukuru can access water for free. So again, this is quite a win for the plan. Yeah, and so I think I'll just mention the benefits of the plan. I think it's something you can continue interacting. Maybe you'll also notice some benefits that I might not mention. But I think some of the benefits we see from this plan is that the plan was wonderful because there was negotiated planning standards, meaning what is being implemented is what the community actually recommended. And so the plan has not displaced a lot of the community, because there was negotiation between the community and the state and providing the little spaces that were needed to provide for infrastructure. And then the other one is we have community contracting. It's the community that has provided semi-skilled labor and unskilled labor to this implementation of the plan. And then there's also community inclusivity. There's ownership of this plan because it came from the community. And then there's overall improvement of the settlement conditions. For instance, we can see we have schools, we have opened up roads, we have health facilities, we have water. And so even access to emergencies is now very easy. Yeah, so and then we now linked Mukuru to COVID, because I think we are still not out of the woods when it comes to COVID. So what has been the benefit of the plan to COVID? So I think the community contracting has helped to push on a number of the community members economically, because I think during COVID-19, a lot of people were losing their economic, their areas of where they get their daily wages, but this one helped. And then we had borehole drilling, which has improved the COVID hygiene. And then we also had a lot of CHVs training by NMS, and also new CHVs were brought on board to train the community on COVID and also mitigate the COVID spread. Yeah, I think these are some of the wins when it comes to Mukuru SPA. And I think finally is that the lessons that we might learn, we have learned from these. I think there are more lessons, but just some of them. Yes.
Just before we go to the lessons, Charity, if you allow me.
Yeah,
so in further to that, in terms of addressing housing, the government, the cabinet approved construction of 13,000 housing units, and already a budget has been allocated to that. We are also implementing something that we learned in the city of Dar es Salaam called the simplified sewer, which is at the plot level. And something that Charity forgot to mention was that there was goodwill from the political class, especially the president, when he heard about the Mukuru special planning areas. He set up something called the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, which their first mandate was to implement the Mukuru special planning area as it was. And they were given 2 years to do that. So as we speak, there's been a lot of development. The housing process, I think, has already commenced. I think they have tendered. But also in terms of also addressing the land issue, I think there have been a discussion of if the people who own this land can be compensated, but also we have to investigate. As SDI, we are saying no compensation because most of them acquired this land while the people of Mukuru were still, initially it was government land, it was public land. Then the people who acquired this land got the land where the people of Mukuru are squatting in there. So far, you have seen the development that has happened. There's access to clean water. Even during the COVID period, there was access to clean water, which greatly, I think, in terms of saving lives. So even when the water came, we have seen less outbreaks of cholera. There is access. So one of the things that we also learned, as slum dwellers, we tend to plan inwardly. We tend to look to plan inside. We basically fight for things that are if it's access to water, to bring in water to the community, to bring in toilets to the community, proper housing. But the other thing about Mukuru was also, we also worked in how can Mukuru be connected to the other parts of the city? How can the residents of Mukuru connect in terms of commerce, in terms of trade, in terms of commuting to other parts of the city? So that was another win for us. Charity, continue.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Yeah, so I think we're just looking at the lessons that we've learned from the Mukuru SPA. And so I think one of the most integral lessons, just borrowing from what Joe has mentioned, is that there is need to upscale the process to other city informal settlements, just beyond looking inwardly. How can this model be taken up and implemented in other informal settlements within Nairobi and even beyond? Because I think it was a good model because we've seen the implementation has taken place. And then it's important to have a very powerful upward engagement. And when I say upward engagement, is engagement with the state, engagement with the various duty bearers, in order to ensure that the plan that has that the plan is adapted and then implementation commences, so that the plan speaks to what is happening on the ground in terms of implementation. And then the other lesson is to ensure that there is implementation by the state is in line with what the community has proposed. Yeah. And then I think the other lesson is to have very powerful advocacy teams to ensure that we minimize on the evictions. And one of the ways, I think, one of the ways to do advocacy is to have these development plans, because the state is will now definitely have to follow the plan. So the evictions automatically become lower. So I think those are some of the lessons that we picked from the SPA.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
and,
that mark,
and
yeah.
Charity, just to add on another lesson.
Yeah.
Is that initially for many years, SDI has been making partnership alliances with the mayors, with the members of parliament, with the councillors, with the members of the county assembly. But we realized part of the challenge was the political class has got they have a sell-by date. Their sell-by date is the next election. So you'll form one alliance with this mayor, the next elections is kicked out. So we also learned it's very, very important for those who are going into planning in cities to make alliances with the technocrats with the planners, with the engineers, with the directors. So that's another lesson that we learned, especially the middle level management, because in Mukuru, they are the ones who actually pushed for this and made this a success. We can move on to the next slide, Charity.
Okay. Yeah.
So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the issues of climate change, and just to give you a small background and the challenges. I think as Africans, the issues of climate change, in the past, a number of years ago, we looked at the issues of climate change, global warming and all that. We looked at it as a northern problem. We looked at it as snow melting in the North Pole, logging in the Amazon River. And I think we did not relate. We thought those we usually call them white people's problems, which have got nothing to do with us. But over the last number of years, we have seen actually the challenges of climate change are real. They are here with us in Africa. We have seen a number of challenges in terms of the change into the weather patterns. And with the weather patterns, there is a threat to food security. Right now here in Kenya, a number of counties are facing drought. Their government is organizing relief. Also, we are also seeing increased flooding. We are also seeing lakes all of a sudden breaking the banks and evicting people. And especially for us who are in the field of access to housing and land, there's a new phenomena we are calling eviction by climate change, whereby, for example, in the city, people living along the riparian, we have seen their houses swept away. People living along the lake, we have seen the lake swelling to rooftop to their houses. So, and I think for us getting into this space as SDI as a network is also the realization of the challenges of climate change in informal settlements. And some of this I talked about, increased flooding. And usually the challenges that are happening, the flooding that happened in informal settlements have got usually nothing to do with the activities within the informal settlement. It's what's happening upstream. If the sewer breaks, all the rubbish, everything ends up in the informal settlement. We have seen a number of fires, hazards with the flooding. So all these challenges. So SDI as a network in the last 6 to 5 years, we have been pushing for more recognition of the challenges of climate change in informal settlements and the adverse effects. We have also been looking at the mitigation. We also been looking at the adaptive nature of slum dwellers in terms of addressing these issues. We have also been looking and supporting the small activities that communities are doing in terms of addressing these challenges. We have young people planting trees, reclaiming river riparians. We have young people creating parks within their communities and safer spaces for children to play in. We have women groups that we are supporting, recycling and building recyclable sanitary towels from discarded clothes. We have seen young people recycling, building furniture out of tires. So we have a project at the moment we are calling the, and just before I go to the VCA, we are also been pushing for more localizing of the climate change discussion. My opinion, the climate change discussion is very elitist. It's very, a few people understand it. If you look at where discussion around climate change happened, if you look at COP, I think it was called COP27 that just ended, was in Glasgow. If you look at the other COP or somewhere else. But now SDI, we are pushing to localize the climate change agenda at the national level. In Kenya, we have a climate change secretariat where nobody knows what they do. At the county level, at the moment, they are pushing for climate change policies, which we are supporting a number of counties in Kisumu, Nakuru, and Nairobi. And then we are also looking at the actions that communities are doing in terms of mitigating, in terms of resilience. And we are trying to amplify that, and we are trying to get more support, and we are trying to get the counties, the national government, putting more resources in these actions that are being done by the community. So the Voices for Climate Action is a project that is being supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Netherlands. We are working in a consortium of 3 organizations locally, the WWF and HIVOS and a number of other organizations. And basically, as it says, is to amplify local action, is to build a bigger voice for communities in terms of whatever they are doing. and for us, it's also an opportunity for us to build a very strong youth resilience actors and climate change activists. And so far, the support, it's been overwhelming. And I think as SDI, especially in Kenya, we have managed to mobilize over 500 groups, young people doing all this work. Charity, if you can move to the next slide, just those, if there is a next slide, Charity. So these are some of what I talked about. Climate change is a high-level discussion, very elitist, secluding communities. And for us, localizing the community is making sure we mainstream the discussion around climate change in everything that we do. We are looking at, as I was mentioning earlier, we are looking at alternative sources of energy, because most of the people living in informal settlements use charcoal, which comes from firewood. Charity, you can move to that. We are also looking at solid waste management, declining of polluting rivers, urban heat. So basically, climate change is not treated as a priority by government. And just to share something we found funny, which is not really funny, in one of the counties, we found that the budget for entertainment at the government office, at the governor's office, was higher than what they were allocating the environmental department. So for them, the priority is sausages and biscuits and samosas for the governor. And this is a narrative that we want to change in terms of making and the committees pushing for county governments to put more resources in terms of addressing climate change action. You can move to the next slide, Charity. Like I said before, we are rushing because of time and because so basically the agenda is to bring climate change agenda to the grassroots level, enhance prioritization of climate change agenda, especially in urban poor areas by the government, COs and CBOs. And also what the project intends to do is to build the capacity of CSOs and CBOs and to build a network of CBOs and CSOs which are working in the climate change area, a bigger voice in terms of now those issues. So it's attainment of human rights, enhance gender equality and social inclusion, inclusive conservation to revitalize civil society in Kenya, reduce the disconnect between Kenyans and civil society. Next slide, Charity.
Joe, could I suggest?
My apologies, I have to go very fast.
Joe, could I ask you to?
Or we leave the remaining time for questions.
Yeah, maybe we should go to questions. Maybe if you offer.
Please do. Please do. So one of the questions here, I see there's a PhD student working on flooding in Dar es Salaam. He says, I don't think SDI is working here. I'd love to connect with them. Yes, whoever asked the question, I think it is somebody called Ryan Thomas. We have an SDI affiliate called CCI, Center for Community Initiatives. It's based in Dar es Salaam and a number of major cities in Tanzania. Thank you. But you can follow up with me, Ryan. I can connect you to the director, Dr. Tim Desi, who is the director of CCI. And we have got a very big movement in Dar es Salaam. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Ryan has actually had to leave, but I will pass that information on to him. He is one of our PhD students. So let me invite questions from the audience and from those online. So if you have a question in the audience, if you're in person, just come down and then we can stand you in front of the lectern so our speakers can actually see your face when you're asking a question. And if you're online, kindly either raise your hand, maybe if you stop sharing, and then we'll be able to see other faces when they ask a question as well. Let me start with a question while others are trying to quickly come up with their own question here. I love the story that you've shared with me or shared with us. Let me actually walk you so you can, I don't know, wait, yes. There you go, okay. the stories of community-based participation, and I think it's relevant everywhere, the same idea. Can we imagine, even in Ithaca, if we actually were to go out and design our roads, would we create the roads that the standards perhaps have set for us? And how powerful it is to actually ask people what it is they want before you plan. You started out with a conversation about there not being policies and regulations to do this work. And so I see that you have extensively developed governance networks with nonprofits, with multilateral development organizations, with academic organizations, and then built these informal relationships, or perhaps somewhat formalized, with alliances with politicians or with planners. But I'm curious about how, to what extent you're able to try to institutionalize some of the successes that you've had so that it becomes the standard or the code of what is what happens moving forward. So how much do you balance the kind of community level learning that you have developed and the attention to that scale, and how much do you try to then institutionalize it so that it becomes a new sets of standards everywhere else? Thank you.
Thank you. Charity, you will take that. Just very briefly to mention why SDI partners with other organizations. Initially, when we were working in isolation, or we thought we could solve all community problems and solve small and all slum problems on our own. When we went to the mayor's office with the data that we had collected, it was rubbish in, rubbish out. But when we partnered with academia, University of Nairobi and other partners, I think partnering with academia gives some level of credibility to the data that we had collected. And hence us working and partnering with, and the partnerships are usually very institutionalized. It's a win-win for everybody. For example, the charity comes from the University of Nairobi. We have an MOU each year, University of Nairobi, and 6 students who are planning students to work with us, to work with slum dwellers. And in terms also, will help the university in whatever research work that they are doing. So it's a win-win. Charity, you can talk about the role of SPS in terms of standardizing SPS, because we don't want the entire Nairobi having 2-meter sub-arterial roads.
Thank you for that, Joe. I think the issue of standardizing, I think here it's an issue of flexibility, because I think every informal settlement has its own special or rather unique needs. So I think the factor that was of great concern here is the issue of space. So there is the question of to what extent do we institutionalize some of these standards. So we also had a lot of challenges bringing the county government on board and trying to convince them about flexible standards, because these are their standards that they have built that should guide planning within the country. So we had to do a lot of meetings with the county. We had to do a lot of works within the community just to show that some of these existing standards within the community are really not applicable for informal settlements, because we've had plans previously within the country, but these plans only suppress informal settlements further. They only increase marginalization in informal settlements further, because only the formal areas are planned for where the standards can fit. So we had this conversation of flexibility. We've had even a lot of exchanges with the government officials, also to India, just to learn how we can adjust or augment some of these standards. And so I think that led to a lot of buy-in by the county government, especially on how to reduce some of these standards. However, we recognize that every informal settlement is different. And so maybe if we go to another informal settlement, the standard might not be the 12 we mentioned, the standard might not be the 5.5, but it will be different based on the needs of that informal settlement and also based on the space availability of that particular informal settlement. But I think right now it's safe to say that there's a lot of buy-in and there's a lot of thinking towards flexibility of planning based on an area's need.
Hi, Joe and Charity. Oh, thanks for being here. Our I really enjoyed the presentation and having you walk through it with us. And you talked a lot about how you were able to kind of challenge the standards, especially due to like road width. And you also talked about using a simplified sewer, so you did not have to displace people. But I would be curious to know more about how you chose where the roads went, and if you were able to also avoid displacing people with the roads, or if that wasn't possible, how the conversation was around where the roads would go, who might have been displaced, and where they might have gone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe I'll start by mentioning what Joe had mentioned, that for the roads planning in particular, we engaged the structure owners. So the structure owners own the spaces in the informal settlement, and for the roads where the roads were recommended, there are already existing smaller informal roads within those areas. You know, an area where people walk a lot, it forms a path, and that is the identified road. So we didn't come up with new roads, but it was just improving these existing roads, finding a way to expand them because they were very small. You'd find a road that is just 3 meters wide, and this road is supposed to support services like fire engines into the settlement. So the structure owners now were deciding these are the number of houses that we need to demolish in order to provide or to create room for roads expansion. So the consultation was very much revolving around structure owners who now provided these spaces for roads construction. Yeah, I hope I've answered the question.
And just to add, there was an earlier question around the issue of where the displaced went. I think there's always space around informal settlements. You can walk in at the moment in Mukuru and with your mattress and get accommodation. But also in terms of what the Nairobi Metropolitan, the plan was, because we took data of all the people who had demolished their structures. The idea was that when the housing is done, they will get first priority. And that's the plan that is at place at the moment. Because the government, like I said before, the cabinet approved the construction of 13,000 houses. A budget has been put, the tendering has been done. So the idea was all the people who are displaced were to get first priority when it comes to the housing allocation.
Thank you, Joe. I have a question in regards to when you were mentioning climate change and everything. So when you guys were speaking about community engagement and the methods that you guys use to in order to develop the Mukuru community and figuring out what the community needs, I was wondering if you guys are thinking about methods and ways that you were going to reuse the waste that was developed over time in the communities. So just different sustainable methods that you guys can reuse the waste that's already developed.
Thank you. Probably I didn't get you quite clearly, but probably I can understand your question. At the moment, what we are doing, I said, in terms of addressing climate change, we are also looking at waste management. We are also looking at recycling. One of the things we realized as SDI, because our advocacy work has revolved around land and housing, we realized we are the Johnny come-latelys in the climate change space. People have been recycling, people have been using waste, people have been using even e-waste. We have a number of initiatives supported by other organizations where they're even using human waste to produce gas. They are even using, there's a lot of recycling going on, bottles. One of the things locally here, the government effort in terms of addressing this issue, Kenya is one of the few countries which have got a total ban on the use of plastic bags. I think the fine is 1 million shillings, which is not worth the risk. You'd rather buy a basket and put groceries there. But there's a lot of groups, even at the moment, that we are supporting that are doing recycling of plastic, of paper, of bottles, but then again, we are not saying that we have suddenly become expert. We still want to learn more. There's an organization called Synergy, which supports community in providing toilets, but they also collect the waste to produce fertilizer or something. So there's a lot of recycling, and we are open to one of the things that I think our partnerships with Cornell, and this I talked to Linda and Professor Victoria, was we also want to learn more in terms of the climate change, in terms of strategies, in terms of new ideas, in terms of SDI, like I said, is a network of learning and sharing. And I think we are open to learning more ideas, strategies on, and the request was also to, if that's something that we lack in capacity in terms of all these ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Charity? While waiting for Charity, somebody else can come in.
Joe and Cherry, it's nice to see you both. I was on an earlier organizing call with you, but I finally got a full overview of your project. Hopefully, quick question, one for Joe, one for Charity. Joe, you had a slide that was, I think, divided the consultation zones. And I noticed quickly, you didn't dwell on it, but one of them said unsuccessful. So I'm just curious how that was defined in terms of an unsuccessful intervention. And Charity,
I'm sorry, sir. I see you are wearing a mask. Probably you can be more audible if you just lower your mask a little bit. Please, I beg. Just can talk without the mask.
Okay, sorry, my mic was off.
Now you are clear. Thank you.
Okay, I'll cut right to the chase. Joe, you had a slide that was a map of consultation zones, one of which was labeled unsuccessful. So I'm just curious what that meant. You didn't dwell on that, but
yes,
the other ones were, I guess, deemed successful. And Charity, you may have touched on this, and I apologize, but I was curious whether or not the infrastructure upgrades and interventions that you discussed at length, was that coupled with sort of any sort of broader land formalization or regularization of tenure, land tenure and property title to the community as well?
Okay, I'll take the first one. And okay, you're not done.
No, I'm done. Definitely done.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's a very, and I think to commend you, you noticed the maps, the unsuccessful area. I'll talk about the successful area. So one thing about Mukuru, the area is called Chandaria land. It's almost 97 acres of land. The area is owned by a company known as Orbit Chemicals. It has been in dispute with the government for a very long time. So they had sued the government because the land was invaded. They had sued the government for lack of income. Like I said, our justice system is funny. The courts awarded them 11 billion shillings. They appealed, and I think we pushed the government to appeal. So the government won. So why we said it was successful, the people, the area, first of all, it's very gentrified. People have taken the risk and built high level, just vertical slums, basically, concrete slums, basically. So what they said is that for us, we are negotiating with the owner of the land. We are willing to buy the land. So we don't need your enumerations. We don't need to be part of this SPA. We said, fine. But anyway, we ended up collecting the information. So come last year, December, that was almost 4 years later. If you Google, if you go to the internet and search for the road for the rich, the government has built this very ambitious road we are calling the road for the rich, that cuts from the city center, the CBD, to the airport. It's we call the road for the rich because you have to pay to use that road. So that road was passing right through the area that they refused. So there have been a lot of demolitions and evictions. And that even there's, I can send you some links that you can do more reading. That is one area that we were not successful. It is more formal. They are built with stones. And the other areas, they use zinc or corrugated roofing sheets, the entire Mukuru. But that area, there is more, the area is more formal. There's some level of road network. There's some level of infrastructure that the city provides. So that's the one area that we are not successful. I don't know, Charity, you can add?
Yeah, I think I can add, I can take it from there. Maybe to address the question of infrastructure upgrading and land regularization. I think based on what Muturi has said, most of the land in Mukuru is private land. And you'll find that the state most of the time will try and plan in public land. However, for Mukuru, it was an exception because it was declared as a special planning area. And a special planning area is anchored on the Land Act of Kenya, 2012. So what happened is that through SPA, we were able to justify, through this declaration, we were able to justify that public health and human dignity precedes land issues. So you'll find that, for instance, in Mukuru, I'll quote, for instance, 2019, we had 4 deaths as a result of cholera outbreaks. So our question to the county was, should people continue dying because the land is private? So this brought the issue of public health, the issue of human dignity, and the beauty with the country is that we have some good policies. It's just an issue of enforcement. So we have the Public Health Act, which states that water can be provided even in these areas in order to curb the public hygiene related issues. So infrastructure was provided. For instance, infrastructure such as water was provided by the institution called Nairobi Water. And Nairobi Water ideally cannot provide water in public land. But Mukuru was an exception because of the many cholera cases, and the water was provided. So the same has happened for road infrastructure and also the drainage patterns that are being put up. They have been put up in this land as much as there's not much regularization, or we can't say the land belongs to the state, but the infrastructure has been provided nonetheless. Joe, you have something to add?
Yeah. And I think just basically, as we are presenting here, people might think it was a very smooth, flawless process, but we dealt with a lot of challenges. First of all, there are people who want to maintain status quo. We have a group of people. Just to give you the synopsis of Mukuru, we have 94% tenants, almost 94% tenants. Then we have structure owners. Structure owners form something very negligible, around 5%. But then you have people who are less than 1% who actually own titles to the pieces of land. So we have that as a challenge. We had a challenge from structure owners. They went way out to try to fight this process. They went to court. Then we went to the landowners. The good thing with the landowners, these are very well connected, very rich, very private citizens. Some of them were in government, some of them were judges. We didn't have a lot of challenges from the landowners because some of them didn't want to be associated with the eviction, didn't want to be associated with slums. Then we have another level. We call them, initially you are calling them cartels. These are organized group of people, gangs, that provide an opportunity, a capacity gap from the city, and they took advantage. But now we call them informal service providers. These are the people who provide water, and usually it's stolen water. They just tap the pipes. There is something we call Mukuru power. They usually tap electricity from the high voltage power lines and distribute electricity within Mukuru, which is dangerous, which is poor quality. For example, if in some plots, if 5 of us decide to switch on our TVs, it trips, it goes off. If somebody decides to iron his shirt, it goes off. That's what I'm talking about, the low quality. And it's usually more expensive. Charity didn't talk about something we call the poverty penalty, where people in Mukuru pay more for services for being poor. So let's say, for example, the lowest you can find it's around 500 shillings per month, which is in terms of dollars, it's around $5. But for the same amount of money in more planned neighborhoods, more rich neighborhoods, they pay less than that. In terms of water, they pay 20 shillings for a 20-liter jerrycan, up to 50 shillings. And in more upmarket area, more rich areas, I think they pay something like 50 cents per cubic, whatever. I don't have the numbers. So that's what we call the poverty penalty. So in terms of also other challenges, we also had challenges from these informal service providers. These are the people who want to maintain status quo. These are people who want to continue getting rich from taking advantage of the poor by providing that service at a very higher cost. But these things are not done in isolation. We know for them to get this water, probably somebody in Nairobi Water gets a cut, somebody in Kenya Power gets a cut. We have informal service garbage collectors, where you have to pay for your garbage to be removed. We have informal toilet, because most of them are pit latrines, informal collectors, they are called ambulances. These are a number of challenges that we have to deal with and to negotiate with. So when it comes to rentals, all these structures are rentals from between $20 to $50, which is $2,000 to $5,000 per month. This is money that is tax-free. They don't pay taxes for this money. Most of them own up to 1,000 units. They have enforcers, people who collect the rent on their behalf.
Thank you. We are at time, so I so appreciate you staying up late and calling in from so far to give us really such a clear window into daily life and the realities of planning in places like Mukuru that you have talked about. And while the context and the substance seem so very different from places in the United States, so many of the themes are actually very resonant with what is happening here in community planning, in the changing, envisioning the codes, in the political realities of the process, in the complexities of advocating for renters. So I so appreciate the real work that you are doing there. And I really hope that some of our students will express their interest and be able to continue our partnership by working with you this summer. Please join me in online and in person in thanking our guests today. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Thank you and good night.
And thank you on behalf of Charity and I. Thank you for having us. And it has been wonderful.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.